The restaurant was alive with chatter, the clinking of silverware, and the soft glow of warm lights that made the polished tables shine. It was the kind of place where people came to feel important, where managers walked with stiff pride and customers expected their meals served with flawless timing. But on this evening, something happened that cut through the smooth rhythm of the night and placed a heavy weight in the air. Keanu Reeves sat quietly at a corner table, unnoticed by most. He wore a simple black shirt, his hair loose, and his presence was calm, humble, almost invisible. He had come here not to be recognized, but to find a quiet meal before heading back to a long night of work. He enjoyed watching people, finding stories in their faces. What he didn't know was that tonight, he would become part of a story that would change more than just his evening. It began when a young waiter noticed a family standing outside the glass doors of the restaurant. The family was clearly homeless. Their clothes were worn, their shoes torn, and the youngest child clutched a small blanket that had lost all its color. They didn't step inside. They just stood there staring at the food being carried to tables, their hunger written all over their faces. The waiter, whose name was Daniel, glanced at them more than once. Each time, his eyes softened, his heart pulled. Finally, in a quiet act of kindness, he took a plate of bread and soup from the kitchen and slipped out the side door. He bent down, placing the food in the hands of the children, smiling as he whispered, "This is for you. Eat while it's warm." Keanu noticed this from his corner. The kindness caught his attention like a flame in the dark. He leaned forward, watching, feeling something stir in his chest. But the manager saw it too. His face twisted in anger, his voice cutting across the room like glass shattering. "Daniel, what do you think you're doing?" The entire restaurant froze. People turned, forks suspended, eyes wide. Daniel stepped back inside, his hands trembling slightly, though his eyes stayed gentle. "They were hungry," he said softly. "They have children. I couldn't just watch." The manager's voice rose, sharp with pride and cruelty. "This is not a charity. You represent this restaurant. Giving away food without permission is theft. You are fired. Leave your apron and go." The words fell heavy like stones thrown into a still lake. Daniel's face paled. The family outside had disappeared into the night, clutching the food with gratitude, unaware of the storm they had left behind. Keanu's chest tightened. He felt anger and sorrow rise together. He thought of all the times he had seen kindness punished, of how humility was often misunderstood as weakness, and he could not stay silent. He pushed back his chair and stood, his tall frame suddenly noticed by everyone in the room. The whispers began instantly, people recognizing who he was. But Keanu didn't care about the attention. His focus was on Daniel, the young waiter who had chosen compassion over rules, and on the manager whose pride had crushed it. His voice was calm, but it carried through the restaurant with weight. Firing someone for showing kindness says more about you than it does about him. The room went silent. The manager's face turned red, but Keanu's eyes stayed steady, unflinching. Daniel looked at Keanu with disbelief, his lips parted, as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Keanu stepped closer, his tone respectful yet firm. "Rules are important, yes, but humanity is greater. When a child is hungry, the right choice is not a question, it is an answer." A murmur spread through the customers, some nodding, others whispering their agreement. The weight of truth was too strong to ignore. The manager's pride battled with fear. He stammered, "This is none of your business." Keanu's eyes softened, but his words cut sharp. "Kindness is everyone's business." The moment hung heavy, the air thick with tension. Daniel lowered his gaze, ashamed not for what he did, but for the punishment he had received. Keanu reached into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. He placed a crisp note on the table, not for the meal, but for Daniel. "This is for you," he said quietly. "Not because you gave food away, but because you remembered what it means to be human." The manager stared, trapped between anger and the silent judgment of every eye in the room. And in that charged silence, Keanu knew one thing. This night was not over. It had only just begun. The restaurant still buzzed with whispers long after Keanu had spoken. Customers leaned across their tables, murmuring to each other, some glancing at the manager with disapproval, others staring at Keanu with a mix of awe and curiosity. The waiter, Daniel, stood frozen in place, his apron still tied around his waist, his hands trembling slightly as if unsure whether to untie it or hold on. Keanu turned to him and said gently, "Come, let's step outside for a moment." His tone wasn't commanding but kind, giving Daniel space to decide. Daniel hesitated, glancing at the manager who stood stiff, his jaw clenched, but the young man slowly nodded and followed Keanu toward the door. As they stepped out, the cool night air wrapped around them. The city outside was alive, cars honking, footsteps rushing along the sidewalks, neon signs flickering. But just a few steps away, under the shadow of an old street lamp, the homeless family sat together, sharing the food Daniel had given them. The children were eating eagerly, their small hands clutching the bread as though afraid it might vanish. Keanu and Daniel watched silently for a moment. The scene spoke louder than any argument. Daniel's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "I knew I'd get in trouble, but I couldn't ignore them. I've been there before, sir. Not homeless, but close. My mom used to skip meals so I could eat. I couldn't just watch those kids go hungry." Keanu felt a lump form in his throat. His own life had been marked by losses, by long nights of struggle that fame could never erase. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "What you did was right. Never doubt that." Daniel's eyes shone with unshed tears. "But I lost my job." Keanu's gaze drifted back to the family. The youngest child, her face still smudged with dirt, looked up and gave a shy smile as she bit into a piece of bread. "Sometimes," Keanu said softly, "losing something for kindness means you've gained something far greater. Dignity. Truth. The kind of wealth no one can take from you." Daniel nodded slowly, though the pain of uncertainty lingered on his face. Suddenly, the restaurant door burst open. The manager stormed out, his voice sharp as he pointed at Daniel. "You're trespassing now. Leave, and don't come back." People from inside pressed against the windows watching. A few customers even stepped out, murmuring, "This isn't right," and "He only fed hungry kids." The tide of opinion was shifting, and the manager felt it pressing against his pride. Keanu stepped between the manager and Daniel, his calm presence steady as a shield. "You should be ashamed," he said, his voice low but heavy with conviction. "This young man showed more leadership tonight than you ever did." The manager scoffed, "And who are you to judge me?" Keanu looked him in the eye. "Someone who understands that power is meant to protect, not punish. Respect is earned, not demanded." The crowd around them stirred with quiet approval. Some even began filming on their phones. The manager's face turned red, the pressure mounting. Daniel lowered his head, whispering, "Please, I don't want a scene." Keanu turned to him, his expression softening. "Sometimes a scene is necessary to show the world the truth." Just then, the father of the homeless family approached timidly, his voice rough but filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said to Daniel, his eyes shining. "You fed my children when no one else would. We won't forget this." Daniel's lips trembled, and for the first time since the firing, his face broke into a fragile smile. The manager, flustered and desperate to regain control, snapped, "Enough! This ends now." But Keanu's calm reply landed like thunder. "No, this is just beginning." And in that charged moment, under the glow of the street lamp, Keanu knew the story was no longer about one fired waiter or one cruel manager. It was about the kind of world people chose to build, one where rules crushed kindness or one where kindness reshaped the rules. The street outside the restaurant had turned into something more than a sidewalk. It was now a stage where truth and pride collided. Customers lingered, staff peeked nervously through the glass doors, and the homeless family huddled close, eating, quietly yet watching with wide eyes. Daniel stood uncertain, his apron still around his waist as if clinging to the last piece of his job. Keanu stood beside him, steady as a mountain, refusing to let the weight of injustice push the young man down. The manager's voice broke the silence. "This is not your fight, Mr. Reeves. You're only making it worse. If we gave free food to every person on the street, we would close our doors in a week." The words stung the air, but Keanu's expression did not change. He stepped forward, his tone calm but piercing. "What closes doors is not kindness, it's greed. People don't remember the taste of the food as much as they remember the heart behind it." The crowd murmured in agreement. A woman from inside, still holding her unfinished meal, came forward. "He's right. I would come here more often if I knew compassion was served with the menu." Another man nodded. "Firing him for helping kids? That's the real theft here. Stealing dignity." The manager's face darkened, but he couldn't silence the voices rising around him. Daniel lowered his gaze, whispering, "I never wanted attention. I saw hungry children and I remembered myself as one." His voice cracked and Keanu placed a steady hand on his shoulder, encouraging him to continue. With trembling words, Daniel shared his truth. "My father left when I was 6. My mom worked 3 jobs, but sometimes we had nothing but a loaf of bread for days. One night, a stranger left groceries at our door. No name, no explanation. That act carried us for weeks. I told myself, if I ever saw someone in need, I wouldn't look away." The crowd fell silent. Even the busy street seemed to hush, holding its breath. Keanu's eyes glistened, his voice low and full of weight. "And tonight you kept that promise. That's the kind of man the world needs. Not fewer of you, more." The homeless father stepped forward again, his children clinging to his sides. His voice shook, heavy with emotion. "You don't know what it means to us. We've been turned away so many times, treated like dirt. Tonight my kids ate with dignity because of him." A little girl peeked from behind him, holding the crust of bread Daniel had given. She whispered, barely loud enough, "Thank you." Words struck Daniel like a soft hammer on glass. His tears spilled freely, but he smiled through them. "You're welcome," the manager, desperate to regain control, snapped. "This is all very touching, but feelings don't pay bills. Restaurants survive on order, not pity. I made my decision." Keanu turned his gaze on him, calm but sharp as a blade. "Then maybe it's time people decide if they want to eat at a place where kindness is punished." A ripple of energy moved through the crowd. Several customers placed money on the counter inside, telling the remaining staff to give it to Daniel. One woman spoke clearly, "If he's gone, I won't come back." Another added, "Neither will I." The manager looked around, his control slipping. Pride kept his lips pressed tight, but the ground beneath him was crumbling. Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed. "I don't deserve this. I was just doing what anyone should." Keanu leaned close, his words gentle. "Sometimes the simplest act reveals the deepest truth. You've shown us all something tonight." The night deepened around them, but the story was far from over. What began as one act of kindness had ignited something larger, a choice for everyone watching, to stand with pride, or to stand with humanity. And in that fragile moment, the world leaned toward the latter. The night pressed heavier now, but the tension outside the restaurant carried its own light. The crowd had grown, passers-by stopping as whispers spread about what was unfolding. Phones were raised, capturing the scene, and the eyes of strangers turned into witnesses. Daniel stood in the middle of it, fragile yet unbroken, his apron still tied around his waist like a thread holding him to dignity. Keanu stayed at his side, calm, steady, his presence shielding him from the storm of humiliation the manager had tried to unleash. The manager, red with anger and cornered by the quiet rebellion of the customers, raised his voice again. "Everyone thinks they understand business, but when the bills come due, it is discipline and order that keep the lights on, not sentimental charity." His words fell flat this time, bouncing off a crowd whose hearts had already shifted away from him. One older woman, her silver hair shining under the street lamp, stepped forward. "Young man," she said, looking at Daniel, "you reminded us tonight that compassion is the light that keeps the world alive. I would rather eat in a place with dim lights and open hearts than in a palace that closes its doors to the needy. The words stirred the people, nods rippling through them. Keanu watched quietly, knowing truth did not need force. It only needed courage to be spoken. Daniel's voice trembled as he found strength to speak. I didn't plan any of this. I only knew I couldn't stand still when I saw children hungry. Maybe I lost my job, but I would have lost something greater if I had turned away. Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. That is resilience. Daniel, losing for the sake of what is right isn't really losing, it is standing. The homeless father, who had been silent until now, stepped forward once more. His children huddled close to his side, their bellies no longer empty, but their eyes still tired. You don't know what it means, he said, voice breaking. To see someone look at you and not turn away. Tonight, this man gave my children more than food. He gave them a piece of hope. We have lived without it for so long. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the manager faltered, his chest heaving as he struggled with the weight of so many eyes against him. Keanu's tone softened, though his words carried undeniable power. The measure of any place, any person, is not in how they treat the powerful. It is in how they treat the powerless. Tonight, this waiter showed us the measure of his heart, and tonight, you showed us yours. The manager tried to respond, but his words tangled, his pride burning holes in his throat. Instead, he turned away, muttering curses under his breath. Daniel exhaled, the burden of shame lifting, though uncertainty clung to him. What happens now? He whispered. I have no job. I don't know how to pay my rent next month. Keanu looked at him with quiet conviction. Sometimes losing what chains you opens a door to what frees you. Tonight is not an ending. It is a beginning. You don't see it yet, but something greater is waiting. The crowd stirred again, some approaching Daniel to press money into his hand, others offering words of support. One customer said, I own a small cafe down the street. I'd hire you in a heartbeat. Another added, you have more character than anyone I've seen behind an apron. Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed, tears streaking down his face. Why are you all doing this for me? Keanu's answer was simple, steady, and true. Because kindness grows when it is seen. You planted the seed tonight. Now it's taking root. The homeless family stepped forward, the little girl clutching the last piece of bread. She tugged gently at Daniel's sleeve and whispered, You saved us. Daniel fell to his knees, unable to hold back his sobs. He embraced her gently, his tears falling into her small shoulder. Keanu knelt beside them, his arm steady across Daniel's back, and whispered, You see, you didn't lose anything tonight. You gained everything that matters. The crowd, silent but moved, felt the truth settle deep inside them. Yet Keanu knew the story was not finished. Something larger was beginning to unfold, something that would stretch beyond one restaurant, one manager, or one homeless family. This night was planting seeds that would grow into a forest of change. The night air felt heavier now, not with despair but with something new. Possibility. The small crowd that had gathered outside the restaurant no longer looked like strangers passing through the city. They looked like witnesses to something bigger than themselves. Some still clutched their phones, recording, their eyes wide as if they knew the story would ripple far beyond this street. Daniel sat on the curb, his apron folded in his hands, his face still flushed from tears. He looked fragile, like someone who had been stripped of stability. Yet there was also a new glimmer in him. Something Keanu noticed immediately. Humility, resilience, the quiet strength of a man who had risked everything for what was right. Keanu crouched beside him, speaking softly. Daniel, tonight you lost a job, but you gained something greater. You showed courage, and courage has a way of finding doors you never thought existed. Daniel shook his head, voice low. I don't know how to believe that. My rent is due. In a week. I can't tell my mother I lost another job. She works herself to exhaustion already. What will I even say? Keanu rested a hand on his shoulder. You'll tell her the truth, that you chose kindness over fear. That's something no paycheck can buy. The homeless father approached again, holding his children close. His voice was steady this time, filled with quiet strength. You think you've lost everything tonight, but to us, you gave everything. One day when my children are older, I'll tell them about the man who gave them food when the world looked away. The little girl beside him stepped forward and pressed the last crust of bread into Daniel's hand. You gave this to me first, she said softly. Now I want you to have it. Daniel's eyes filled again, and Keanu saw how deeply the exchange cut into him, not with pain, but with a profound sense of meaning. Suddenly, from the corner of the crowd, a woman spoke up. I work for a community shelter nearby. We're always looking for people who understand compassion, not just procedure. Daniel, would you come by tomorrow? I think you belong there. Daniel's mouth opened in disbelief. You'd really give me a chance? You already proved yourself tonight, the woman said. Murmurs spread again. Another man, dressed in a suit, added, I own a catering company. Someone like you would be an asset. A man who knows food is about humanity, not just business. Offers began to bloom around him like unexpected flowers in dry soil. Daniel looked lost, as though he had stepped into a dream too bright to touch. Keanu smiled gently. You see, resilience is rewarded. Kindness never goes unnoticed. It may feel like darkness now, but the light is already breaking through. The faux manager, who had been standing stiff at the edge of the scene, finally snapped. This is ridiculous. You all think kindness runs a business? It doesn't. It's weakness, and weakness destroys success. His words, sharp and bitter, fell flat this time. The crowd turned on him, their expressions cold. Someone muttered, No, greed destroys success. Another added, I won't spend a cent in your restaurant again. The manager's face drained of power. He stormed back inside, slamming the door behind him, the sound echoing like the end of something hollow. Daniel stared at the door, then down at his folded apron. All these years, I thought a job was the only thing that gave me worth. Tonight I lost one, but maybe I finally found who I really am. Keanu nodded, his voice warm but firm. You found the truth. That dignity is greater than any position. And now, the world sees you for what you are. The crowd began to drift, but not without leaving behind small acts. Some placed bills. In Daniel's hands, some gave him their contact numbers, some simply offered words of encouragement. By the time the street quieted again, Daniel was left with more than he could have imagined. Not just opportunities, but respect. Maya, the little girl, tugged on his sleeve again. You're a hero, she whispered. Daniel knelt down, his tears soft this time. No, I'm just someone who couldn't look away. Keanu, watching them, felt something stir inside him, an echo of his own life, the losses he had carried, the kindnesses that had once saved him. And he knew. This story was no longer just about Daniel. It was about everyone who had watched and chosen what side they stood on. The night was not over, but the seeds planted tonight were already breaking through the ground. The street had grown, quiet after the crowd dispersed, but the echo of what happened lingered in the air like a song that refused to fade. Daniel sat still on the curb, his folded apron resting in his lap, his eyes reflecting both exhaustion and wonder. The homeless family had moved a little further down the block, but they stayed close, as if unwilling to let go of the strange circle of safety that had formed around them. Keanu stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression calm yet thoughtful. The night was heavy, but it carried a glow, one born not of lights but of humanity. Daniel finally broke the silence. I don't understand. I lost my job. I should feel broken, but instead, I feel free. I feel like tonight mattered more than every shift I've ever worked. Keanu lowered himself to sit beside him on the curb. That's because it did. You chose kindness over fear, and that always matters. It may not fill your wallet tonight, but it fills something deeper, the kind of wealth no one can steal. Daniel's voice cracked. But what if I can't keep going? What if this was the only moment I ever had? Keanu turned to him, his eyes steady. One moment of courage is never alone. It grows. Tonight you showed the world what's possible, and the world responded. You don't see it yet, but lives were changed here, including your own. As if to prove his words, the homeless father approached once more. His face was still tired, but there was light in his eyes now. My children will sleep with food in their stomachs tonight, and tomorrow when they wake up, they'll remember that someone saw them as people, not burdens. That memory will carry them longer than you know. The little girl, clutching her small blanket, added softly, "You made me feel like I mattered." Daniel's tears returned, but this time they were not from shame. They were from healing. Keanu rose slowly, helping Daniel to his feet. "This isn't the end, Daniel. This is where you begin again. Sometimes life closes a door so that you can finally walk through the one meant for you." Just then, the woman from the shelter returned, handing Daniel a small card with her number, written in clear ink. "Come tomorrow," she said firmly. "I mean it. We need people like you. People who understand that helping others is not weakness, it's strength." Daniel held the card as if it were made of gold, and then the suited man from earlier approached again. "My catering company has been looking for someone to lead a team, someone who can inspire others. Tonight, you inspired a city block. Imagine what you could do in the right place." Daniel blinked, unable to find words. Keanu smiled quietly. "You see? Doors opening already." The night deepened, but it no longer felt dark. The restaurant that had once seemed so proud now looked small and hollow behind its glass doors. The real story had shifted to the sidewalk, to the place where dignity had been defended and kindness restored. Daniel turned to Keanu, his voice full of gratitude. "Why did you help me? You could have stayed silent. You didn't even know me." Keanu's reply was simple, but it carried the weight of his own life. "Because once strangers helped me when I was lost. And kindness, when passed forward, becomes a chain that never breaks." The words sank deep, not only into Daniel, but into the family listening and into the hearts of everyone who had stayed to the end. The homeless father whispered, "Maybe tonight wasn't just about us. Maybe it was about all of us remembering what it means to be human." Keanu nodded. "Exactly. Respect, humility, resilience, kindness. Without them, we lose ourselves. But when we choose them, even in small moments, we build something greater than any rule or title. We build hope." The street fell into a gentle silence. The homeless children curled against their father, their faces peaceful at last. Daniel stood taller, the apron in his hands no longer a symbol of loss but of transformation. As Keanu stepped back into the night, his figure blending into the quiet city lights, one truth lingered. Sometimes, the smallest act of compassion can shatter the coldest walls and spark a fire strong enough to warm the world. And for Daniel, for the family, and for everyone who had witnessed that night, life would never be the same again.